Jesus has interaction with him and he changes his ways. But what Zacchaeus doesn't do is he doesn't quit being a tax collector, right? He says, I'm going to go out and I'm going to continue being a tax collector, but I'm going to redeem the profession, or I'm going to right the things that are wrong. And I tell my students that story in the light of, it doesn't matter where your career path leads, right? You don't have to go into full-time ministry to impact the world, right? Your job is to go out and provide an impact on the sphere of influence which you have been given, right? Every industry, every company needs some sort of redemption.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Rooted, where we are rooted in truth, growing in freedom, and prospering in life. We're your hosts, Josie and Symone, and we're so excited to bring another guest on this podcast, Drew Whitson. Drew is the co-founder and principal of Endurus Capital. He also teaches at Bethel University, and he happens to be our uncle.
Yeah. Hey guys.
Drew, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for
being
me
here.
This is great.
So, Drew, we'd love to first just kind of ask a little bit about your career journey, your roots, where you come from, just for the context for our audience.
Yeah, so I'm from Red Wing, Minnesota, came to Bethel in fall of 98, was a econ and finance major, which we sadly don't have anymore. I graduated from Bethel in 2002 and went on to work in an investment banking firm in St. Paul. I got my MBA at Carlson and spent about a decade working for Target Corporation in their corporate finance, various corporate finance roles. I concurrently started building a little bit of a real estate portfolio, started with single-family homes, moving into larger multifamily projects, and it eventually got to a place where a couple partners and I launched a firm, which you introduced as Endurus Capital. I also have been teaching at Bethel University for the last, finishing my 6th year right now, and I am a professor of finance here, teaching some of the core finance courses to business students and even some of the finance majors.
Wow, you've done a lot, that's for sure. Yeah, was finance always kind of the goal? Did you always want to go that route?
Yeah, I think so, right? I was the kid when, growing up, I would spend time playing Monopoly by myself, right? Or my parents sort of joke about the times I would ask cashiers, when I was a kid, I'd ask cashiers for the receipt to make sure that they calculated the tax correctly.
So
it certainly ran in my blood from when I was young. So moving into that space was just sort of a natural reflection of my interests.
That's great. You always said you wanted to be a bean counter, right?
I remember. Counters.
Oh my goodness.
That's right. So bean counters is sort of a term that can describe an accountant. And so when you guys were growing up, you'd ask me what I did. And I said, I'm the bean counter. I count the beans.
We always imagine little beans that he stacks up.
Yeah,
no, to this day, when I go to Target and I see the aisle of beans, I think of you because in my mind as a little 5-year-old, I literally thought that you would stack the beans in Target.
Yep.
Yeah. So what did you actually do? Tell us.
Target?
Yes.
Yeah, so a company that large spends a lot of money every year, right? I had certain roles where I would look at, from a finance perspective, are we making good strategic financial decisions, right? I had jobs where I was responsible for a certain amount of money that they would spend on technology or other projects, and it was my job to sort of shepherd that capital through the decision-making process. And I was part of different roles that I was responsible financially for a segment of the business. So if you think about a company like Target that's $100 billion, there's probably 100 little mini CFOs that are responsible for, $300, $400, $1 billion businesses. And so they ran a bunch of tiny little businesses, and they had finance people that got to oversee how they ran those businesses, how profitable they were, how they spent money on marketing, and making sure that there was good returns on the money that they're spending. So really acting as a steward for the investors' capital, that money was being used appropriately and Target was able to make money. And a lot of those type of experiences and job skills directly translate into the kind of teaching that I get to do at Bethel. So some of my courses teaching corporate finance, I draw direct examples of when I was at Target, here kind of the decision-making process, or here's some of the same models that we used at a large organization that I can bring into the classroom and sort of really kind of share that real-world experience to help students prepare for when they graduate and move into the workspace as well.
Yeah, that's one thing I love about having you as a professor, just how you bring that practical life application into the classroom. I know you share lots of stories of failures that happen with Target, but also great things that happen.
That's right.
And it really helps you see that when you go into business, not everything's going to be perfect, and that's okay. And it's about making the decisions and going forward with that.
That's right. I mean, what you learn in undergraduate classes, you don't come out as an expert. You're not a practitioner. What you are is you've developed a sense of a great vocabulary, a sense of how the business world works. And once you get into that first job, they'll actually train you on it, but they need to know that you have an ability to learn, you have an ability to work with groups, you have an ability to make good critical thinking decisions, ask good questions, right? Those are the capabilities that they can help you develop into the actual skills that they need to help run their business.
So as you were working at Target, I remember you were on a panel at the 25 actually, and you talked about this story when you started at Target, kind of the reputation of Bethel.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, can you tell about that story?
Yeah, that was a fun one. So, I mean, one of the questions I often get asked is like, what is it like being a Christian working for sort of a big publicly traded, generally progressive leaning organization? And one of the stories that I talk about was when I first started, I had negotiated a start date that was several months out from when I accepted the job. And shortly after I accepted the job, I started getting paychecks in the mail. And someone in HR messed up the start date. And so for several months before I started, I got these big, nice, fat paychecks in the mail. And I just kind of collected those and set them to the side so that when I started my first week of work there, I brought in this stack of paychecks and I said, hey, just want you to know, looks like someone messed up my start date. Here's all the paychecks that I received. You guys just can sort that out. And they said thanks, and that was about it. And several months later, I was meeting with some other Bethel alumni who also worked at Target, and they said, hey, we got to tell you the rest of this story about what happened when you brought in your paychecks. They said they were so impressed. They said across the board in HR, they were just amazed. They said everyone was talking about this story, about this new recruit, this new hire that came in and didn't cash the paychecks and just sort of brought them in and voluntarily turned them over. And the fact is that Target wouldn't have missed that money. Target said I was actually legally entitled to keep that if I wanted. And it was really here nor there to them. But the amazing part was they said, you have to know that everyone was so impressed with that decision-making and that behavior until they found out that you went to Bethel. And they said, as soon as they found out that you went to Bethel, they actually were not impressed. In fact, the response was, well, I guess that makes sense because he went to Bethel, right? And so what the world had seen as this outstanding, honest, forthright behavior sort of became the norm and the expected from someone who was a Christian that came out of Bethel, because people before me had gone and had developed a reputation around what Bethel students behave and what they're like. And so I thought that was a great lesson for a couple of reasons. One, it was I'm stepping into the shoes of those who have gone before me, right? There's people that have paved the way and created these expectations, and I have to be aware of that, right? Number two is it doesn't take a lot to really impress other people with, good Christian morals and ethics, especially when it came to money, right? To me, I didn't really think about it as a consideration of should I keep it. It certainly wasn't my money, so I didn't hardly think about it. But to the rest of the world, that was a pretty amazing sort of testament to what you believe. And I think three was I recognize that as an obligation for me to continue that legacy and continue the opportunity to pave way for the Bethel graduates that come behind me into Target years later, right? So you sort of feel like you're stepping into something that's much bigger than yourself when you have the Christian label attached to you and certainly pretty close as the Bethel label as well.
Yeah, I think people do get so self-focused throughout their life, and they forget I am representing generations before me and generations ahead of me. Like, this is the reputation that I'm giving.
Right.
So I think that's super important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that story so much. And another story that I love that you've talked about just being a Christian in business is the story of Zacchaeus. And you talk about the importance of redeeming the profession, because as a business major, it's often sometimes criticized, like, oh, how can you be a Christian when you're seeking money or seeking this? Like, that's impossible. So could you tell us a little bit about that story? Because I love your perspective on that.
Yeah, so Luke 19, where Jesus meets Zacchaeus, and Zacchaeus has an interaction, and his response was, I'm going to change my ways, right? As I have done wrong, I'm interacting with the world as a tax collector. And by the way, tax collectors, as you guys know, were sort of the bottom of the barrel in terms of respected professions at the time. No one liked the tax collectors. And so Jesus has interaction with him, and he changes his ways. But what Zacchaeus doesn't do is he doesn't quit being a tax collector. right? He says, I'm going to go out and I'm going to continue being a tax collector, but I'm going to redeem the profession, or I'm going to right the things that are wrong. I'm going to change the perception that people have of what I do. And I tell my students that story in the light of, it doesn't matter where your career path leads, right? It doesn't matter. You don't have to go into full-time ministry to impact the world, right? Your job is to go out and influence, provide an impact on the sphere of influence which you have been given, right? Every industry, every company needs some sort of redemption. And I point to that as to say, if in case you ever have roommates that give you a hard time about being a business major, right? You just care about money. My response is no. It's of course you have that perception, and it's my job to change that perception and redeem whatever industry or company or business that I go into.
Yeah, what gave you this drive to talk about this in class, to feel free to share your experiences, to be a professor? Why did you want to do that? Why did you want to work here at Bethel? Yeah,
great question. Part of the reason I was so excited to come back to Bethel and teach was that when I looked back on the personal and professional successes that I had, I was able to see that being rooted, there's your cut, right?
Yeah.
Rooted at Bethel was one of those pieces. I saw faculty members and a school that invested in me. And it was because of that, I don't like the term give back, by the way, I like giving. If I want to give,
yes.
Never give back, you only give. When I wanted an opportunity to give, that was the way that I wanted to pass along the opportunity for the next group of students. I saw professors that invested in me, and I want to reinvest in the current students so that they can go out and be hopefully successful as well. So that was part of my drive. It's certainly not here for the money, in case anyone's curious, right?
Oh, we know.
So it was one of those questions, right? If money was no object, what would you want to do? And this was kind of the top of the pile, and it just sort of worked out in an amazing timing.
I love that. Yeah, and I love how, so with your Endurus Capital that you have going on the quote-unquote side, mainly in the front.
Yes.
I love how you incorporate that into your classroom, and you like actually lead people through deals in the classroom. So could you tell our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, so most undergraduate courses, most undergraduate business students are really designed to go out and work for another organization, right? Be a W-2 employee, which means you are not an independent contractor, you don't own the business, you work for someone else, which is a great way to learn and develop a skill set of industry knowledge. But part of what I wanted to do for students is to give them a peek under sort of the private equity business. Like, what does it look like to run your own business, not from an entrepreneurial position that's not like Shark Tank, right? You think of Shark Tank and entrepreneurs, most students say, well, I'm going to invent a new widget. I'm going to invent an app, right? And so entrepreneurship of product is kind of the forefront of what most students think of entrepreneurship. I wanted to show them entrepreneurship of capital. I wanted to show them what it was like to raise capital to buy and grow an existing business. And part of the way I get to do that is by showing, as my company, Endurus Capital, does 2 or 3 acquisitions a year, where we make large purchases of apartments in the $10 to $30 million range, and then we correspondingly raise $5 or $10 million from investors to make those purchases. I wanted to show them sort of what that looks like, because private equity or running businesses is a huge part of the economy. A lot of people do it, but it's not visible, right? You just don't see a lot of those businesses. There's no billboards for private equity out there, right? There's no billboards for raising this kinds of capital sources, right? It exists, but it doesn't sort of hit the classroom. So I like the opportunity to say, look, here's the deals that I am doing, and every week I'll take the students through one of the steps of like, hey, here's how we talk with investors. Here's what our investor portal looks like. Here are the financial documents and the underwriting when we're looking at buying an apartment building. Here's what it looks like to close a deal, right? I think even last semester we had to buy a specific type of financial derivative on Wall Street, and I made the call. I had it on speakerphone during one of my classes, and we called Wall Street and bought a derivative. So just trying to give them a little bit of a peek under the hood of a part of the economy and the part of what career paths could look like that you're not going to run across typically in an undergraduate education experience.
I think that's great. And for those out there who are like, what is he talking about? Why should people know what you're talking about? Why is business important? Why are these concepts and ideas important? Because I think a lot of people just hear stuff and they're like, oh, that scares me. I'm just going to stay away from that. What advice do you have? Why should we know this?
Well, I think it's important from the sense that there's a lot of amazing ways to find how you operate most efficiently in the world. And this is just one of those ways, right? Some people just really want the sense of more control over their lives, right? Some people really just want a standard paycheck. They want to get paid the same every 2 weeks, and they want to take a vacation every summer, right? Some people really are driven by the opportunity to sort of eat what you kill, right? What is it that you want to contribute to the world? So it depends on your propensity for work, what you are interested in learning, how you're great at networking. So it's just opening up, it's casting a larger net in order to find what you are most and best designed for. Right? And when you open when the purview of options expands, you can start to see, wow, I sort of discovered that there's a lot of different ways that you can be most efficient and effective and happiest in this world. And this is just one of those ways that I have found for me is a useful way of interacting and managing my time and managing a family. And so why do people need to know this? I think it's just, I want them to be encouraged to think of their careers and their lives as having more facets than they might even be aware of.
Yeah, I think that's great. And for those who don't have a way to get that information through classes or being a business major, how should they discover more information regarding this? Are there books that you recommend?
I mean, I would say from like a general education standpoint, you're probably more inclined to just go out and find people or businesses or meetup groups that you're interested in, right? There's a phrase that luck will never find you sitting in your apartment, right?
That's so true.
Go out and find something, right?
Yeah.
Go find people say yes to things you might not otherwise be interested in. Ask questions, right? And there's the depth of knowledge and opportunity out there is huge, right? When I started this business 15 years ago, there was no podcasts or books, right? You're sort of sorting it out. And today the whole world is at your fingertips, right? Between Wikipedia to YouTube to the amazing assortment of podcasts, there's just a great bit of knowledge. So I say be sensitive to the curiosities that might come your way, right? And just go explore things. Say yes to something, try something new, right? And that will sort of lead you down a path of sort of just figuring out what might be of interest.
I love that emphasis on saying yes, because I think it's so easy to get caught up in fear around certain things like, oh, I don't know how to do that, so I shouldn't try, I might fail. But you never know unless you try. And even if you try something and you don't like it, then you at least know you don't like it and you can rule it out. So, yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. When you think about the first time you try something, you better be bad at it, right? Of course you're bad at it. And anyone you see that is good at something was bad at it when they first tried, right?
That's so true.
There's some phrase, the gesture comes before the king, right? Or you always are going to be bad the first time you do it. And so it's saying yes, trying it is always going to be the first step. And it will be better the second time, and you'll iterate and you'll learn. And it's pretty amazing how much opportunity there is when you just sort of say yes. I often tell students one of the great things about doing internships or doing informational interviews is it's really helpful to find out what you don't like doing, right? And because sometimes you don't really know until you actually do something what you don't like doing. So that's my advice.
Kind of going in a different direction here. I know you and your family, you travel a lot actually. Where did this desire of traveling come from? Why do you love traveling so much?
Why do we love traveling so much? That probably starts with my wife, Erica, who was also a Bethel graduate here. She traveled a lot when she was in college. I don't really have a memory of being on an airplane until I was, I think, a sophomore. So I was like 20 years old.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
We did a lot of driving trips when I was a kid.
Okay.
So.
And now you're on the plane all the time.
Oh, we're on a plane all the time. Yeah.
You are going.
So traveling, yeah, it's just amazing to sort of see other parts of the world. When I was a student at Bethel, my good friend and I spent a semester in Australia. And that was a wonderful, eye-opening experience to be able to sort of go halfway across the world. We didn't have cell phones. We barely had the internet back then. So it was just a great learning experience to meet a bunch of new interesting people. So that probably started it, right? It's just the chance to sort of see how big and amazing the world is. It's just not the Midwest. So that was really the root of that. And we try to give our kids the opportunity to sort of see as much as they can and have neat experiences and plan our summer vacations, sort of like you guys did, getting to see all the states growing up, right?
So something I'm so grateful for.
I think there's some common sources of travel amongst us as well.
Oh, for sure.
That's for sure.
What would you say your favorite trip has been in your whole life?
In my whole life.
I know that might be
really
difficult.
Good. I think a couple summers ago, my wife and your grandparents, my wife's parents, went on a 2-week trip to Sweden in Norway and Denmark. So we spent time in Copenhagen, in Oslo, in Stockholm. It was just
Those
a
pictures looked
beautiful place.
amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
The weather was great. The country was wonderful. The people were delightful. We really just enjoyed the chance to go there. So I think those 2 weeks might have been one of the best. Sort of thing. Everything just worked out just perfectly.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Travel is something that a lot of people might get nervous about. Like, how do I do that? How do I even plan a trip? How do I afford a trip? What are some things that have helped you make it easier?
Yeah, I think having your own business, a side benefit of having your own business is that you have access to a lot of business credit cards. And business credit cards allow you, if you sign up for those, there's sign-up bonuses, there's spend bonuses. So we have done a lot of our travel around the world using points and miles, using credit card points, hotel points, airline miles. And so we've really cobbled together a pretty good strategy around that. And if you have 4 kids, so there's 6 of you flying around, it
That
really
adds
helps.
up, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good benefit. So we've been able to travel. In fact, there's a few years in a row, you probably don't remember this, but for Christmas, for your family, we gave out airplane tickets as Christmas gifts because we had so many airline miles.
I
So we would
forgot
just-
about
little
that.
coupons, and
Yeah.
you went, good for one trip
I
anywhere in the
remember that
U.S.,
now.
and they would get to redeem those. So
That's the best gift we could have ever gotten.
it is.
I know another just practical thing that you talk about is the importance of credit score, and specifically credit score around dating. So do you want to share a little about that? Because I think it's so funny, but also amazing at the same time.
Yeah, so your credit score is a reflection of public information on how well you have managed your debt, right? It's another reflection of, do you do what you say you're going to do? Do you make decisions and get yourself in financial positions that you can live up to those obligations, right? And, which is a reflection of a pretty strong personality characteristic, right? And so what I have told students is that if you are dating someone, it probably, maybe even earlier on in the relationship than you might think, it's probably good to have one date night where you say, let's look at your credit score. Like, what is your personal balance sheet? How much debt do you have, right? Because it is a enormous reflection of character traits, propensities for spending versus savings. I have been told that money is one of the top things that couples argue about or can get, split up over. And so I think having some of those values that aligned early in the process is probably a good mechanism to sort of see if you are rooted in
Exactly.
some similar types of values, right? And it doesn't mean everyone has to have a good credit score. It doesn't mean everyone has to have no debt, but you need to have an approach and a mentality to it that aligns to someone that you're going to spend your life with.
I love that advice so much because a lot of times when we think of dating, we just think about personality or connection, and that is important, but you also need to understand, okay, how does this person make decisions? Because ultimately, as a couple, you're going to be making decisions going forward for the rest of your life.
That's right.
So, yeah, thanks for that advice.
Were you thinking about this when you were dating Erica? Erica's
Not
our aunt, by the
specifically.
way.
No one gave me this great advice when I was young. But we knew right away that we were compatible in that space. In fact, I think one of the first things that we did after we got engaged is I paid off her car.
Really?
Well, because that was going to be my car debt as soon as we got married, right? So I'm like, well, I guess I should take care of this now. So, and actually, it's been amazing with Erica. I think we just had a conversation. We've been married 20 years, and we've never had like a major fight over money. We've totally aligned on that, and that's taken
huge.
out.
Wow.
We have other things we can argue about, but that's not one of them. That's been one of the things that we've been really compatible on in terms of how we save, how we spend, sort of the lifestyle we maintain, what we spend money on, and what we don't. And so that's been a really easy part of our relationship.
How did it become so easy?
Well, I think we're aligned, right? I have a couple of friends we always send screenshots of our credit score to. So both mine and my wife's credit score is, nearly perfect, right? And so I think one is she really trusts that I make good decisions, and I trust that she makes good decisions. So we don't have to worry about, hey, I don't get a call from her say, hey, should I spend this? Because I know she's going to make good decisions, right?
Yeah.
So we don't feel like we have to align too much on checking with each other. We sort of trust that each are going to have good decisions. Yep.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about finance specifically, but I really do love your and Erica's story. So could you kind of share that with the audience a little bit?
The how we met story?
Yes, how you met.
I better get it right. They're probably all going to listen to this. So, yeah, I mean, we were both students at Bethel, and we had met at her, I think, 19th birthday party in the spring of '99 in April. I think we went on maybe a date or two, and then she went away for a semester to England, and then she was back, and we overlapped for another semester. I think we went on a few more dates. And then
Wasn't she like not going to date you at first though? Like, didn't it take a bit? Because weren't you friends for a long time?
We were friends for a long time. Yep. So we had tried dating on and off a couple times at Bethel.
Okay.
And then we were getting ready to graduate, and I was like, hey, this girl is great. We're starting we could start our lives together. Mm-hmm. And then she's like, I think I want to be, she knew what she wanted to be. She wanted to be an airline stewardess, or she wanted to be a nanny in London or something. I don't know. She wanted to be Mary Poppins. And
Oh, I can so see that. She'd be such a good Mary Poppins.
She is Mary Poppins.
She is, yeah.
Yeah. And so a couple years later, for a couple years, she was a teacher up here in Lino Lakes, and we were not together. And she had got rumors from people that I was dating someone else, and that sort of flipped the switch, right? Mm-hmm. I should have sent her, for her 24th birthday, I should have sent her a pack of like Old Maid cards just to like, hey, just thought of you.
No.
Right? And then
That's too funny.
So bad. You would do something
I
like
would,
that.
for sure. And
Oh
so,
my
so we ended up getting back together after that, and we were engaged in a few months and then married 6 months later.
Wow.
And Josie, you were in our wedding. You walked on the aisle. And Symone, you weren't born yet, but you were also in our wedding because your mom was set up with
in my mom's
the
tummy.
bridal party on a stool. Yeah, so you were there too.
Perfect.
And you got married in the middle of a snowstorm, right?
January 1st. Yes, it was a
Wow.
nice winter day, and then the ice storm came, and then the snow came after that. So all the important stuff happened, but it was quite a memory.
And I love how you always know the exact amount of days that you've been married, because it starts on January 1st.
Yeah, we married 19 years, 5 months, and 4 months and 9 days. Yeah.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yep.
That's great. Hey, we just want to leave you with this question. What is one truth that you would encourage our audience to be rooted in?
I think the truth would be that God is faithful. And most of the time, life makes more sense in reverse than it does looking forward, right? And so the opportunity to say yes to moving forward in faith, because you will see later on in life that when you look back, how many things have got you to where you were today that you didn't understand, right? So I can look back on lots of different experiences that were really even very difficult, right? Difficult situations or things that I thought were negatives that when I look back was laying a path and a groundwork towards where I am today. Mm-hmm. And so looking back 20 years, I can say, wow, I really can see God's hand working in ways when at the time I couldn't. And it helps me think about, how do I approach life today moving forward for the next 20 years? So for me, that's trust that you can keep moving forward. And if things don't make sense today, they will make sense looking back in the future.
That's great.
Yeah, that's such great advice. Thank you so much, Drew, for all the insight you shared. We really appreciate it, and we know our audience is going to learn so much.
Thanks so
Thanks
much.
for being the best uncle.
You heard it here first.
Just kidding, guys.
Nope.
Just kidding.